Have you ever met someone who is completely, absolutely convinced they are a genius, yet every single decision they make somehow ends in disaster? The kind of person who interrupts experts mid-sentence, dismisses advice without even processing it, and walks through life with this unshakable, almost hypnotic confidence, even when they are clearly and objectively wrong. And what makes it truly unsettling is that no matter how many times reality proves them wrong, no matter how many failures pile up, or how much evidence is placed directly in front of them, their belief in their own superiority never cracks, not even slightly. If you have ever wondered why that happens, the answer is not simply arrogance or ego or personality. It is something far deeper, something literally wired into the human brain itself, a hidden cognitive glitch so powerful that it distorts the way people perceive their own intelligence. And once you truly understand this glitch, you will never look at confidence the same way again. This phenomenon has a name, and it is called the Dunning-Kruger Effect, one of the most fascinating and brutally honest discoveries in the history of psychology, because what it reveals is a deeply uncomfortable irony about human intelligence. The people who know the least about a subject are almost always the most confident about it. Now, at first, that sounds almost too absurd to believe, but when you actually break it down, it makes complete and perfect sense. When you lack knowledge in a complex area, you do not just lack the skill, you lack the mental ability to even evaluate your own skill. You do not have the framework to recognize your mistakes. You do not have the experience necessary to see the gaps in your own understanding. And most critically, you do not even know what you do not know. So your brain quietly fills in all those blanks with assumptions, and those assumptions don't feel like guesses. They feel like facts. They feel like certainty. They feel like absolute clarity. And suddenly, you're walking through life completely convinced that you understand something deeply, when in reality, you have barely scratched the surface. This is exactly where the illusion becomes dangerous, because that false confidence is not experienced internally as doubt or hesitation. It feels like mastery. It feels like control. It feels completely justified, which means these individuals are not performing or pretending. They genuinely believe in their own competence, even when that competence simply does not exist. And this creates a powerful and almost unbreakable disconnect between perception and reality, a gap that logic alone cannot fix, because the very tool that would be needed to recognize the problem is the exact same tool that is malfunctioning. That is why arguing with an overconfident person almost never works. You're trying to correct an error using a system that is completely incapable of detecting the error in the first place. But here's the thing, this is only the first layer of the problem. If it was simply about lack of knowledge, people could learn and eventually improve. The real danger begins when this cognitive blind spot fuses together with something far more emotional and far more personal, the human ego. Because for many people, that loud and unshakable confidence is not just a byproduct of ignorance, it's actually a defense mechanism, a psychological armor built to protect a deeply fragile sense of self. And underneath all that certainty, there is often a very real and very powerful fear, a fear of being exposed as inadequate, a fear so uncomfortable that the brain will do almost anything to avoid it, including constructing an entirely alternate reality where that person is always right, always capable, always in control. This is why admitting ignorance feels so personally threatening to certain individuals, because it's not just about being wrong in a single moment. It feels like being fundamentally broken as a person. And rather than face that discomfort, the brain doubles down, reinforces the illusion, rejects opposing views, dismisses all criticism, and clings even more tightly to the belief of superiority. At that point, you are no longer having a rational conversation with someone. You are engaging with a person who is actively protecting their identity, which means facts become irrelevant, logic becomes completely ineffective, and evidence becomes something to be avoided rather than considered. Now here's where things become even more unsettling, because this behavior is not only tolerated by society, it is actively rewarded. We tell ourselves that intelligence, humility, and accuracy are what lead to success, but the uncomfortable truth is that loud, fast, decisive confidence almost always wins in the short term. The human brain is deeply wired to associate certainty with competence. When someone speaks without any hesitation and presents their ideas with total conviction, our natural instinct is to trust them, follow them, and assume they must know something we do not. This is why overconfident individuals so often rise to positions of power. They get promoted, they gain influence, they attract followers, not because they're the most capable, but simply because they appear the most certain. And over time, that certainty gets reinforced and validated by success, even when that success is actually driven by luck or circumstance rather than genuine skill. This creates a self-reinforcing feedback loop where confidence keeps expanding while their actual competence stays frozen or quietly declines. From the outside, these individuals can look powerful, charismatic, even magnetic, but internally they are completely stuck, unable to evolve, unable to adapt, and completely blind to the very limitations that are holding them back. And here's the most important and uncomfortable truth of all. This is not a flaw that exists in certain broken or arrogant people. This is a universal human tendency, a cognitive bias that quietly influences all of us to some degree. And the moment you become absolutely convinced that you are immune to it is almost certainly the moment you are most deeply under its influence. Because real intelligence doesn't look like loud, unshakable certainty. Real intelligence looks like curiosity. It looks like asking questions. It looks like pausing before drawing conclusions. It looks like being able to say, "I don't know," without feeling personally threatened by those three simple words. The loudest voice in the room is rarely the most knowledgeable. It is simply the least aware of its own limitations. So turn this awareness inward, question your own certainty, challenge your own assumptions, because the moment you believe you have all the answers is the exact moment you stop growing. And in a world that never stops changing, that is not just a limitation, that's a slow and silent risk that can quietly shape your entire life before you ever notice it happening.